Some medieval prisons weren't built to hold you. They were built to erase you. Welcome, darlings. Today we descend into the dungeon designed to make the world forget you, the hole in the floor, the pit into which the most wretched were thrown and condemned to the most miserable fate imaginable. We're speaking about the inescapable medieval oubliette. What is an oubliette? Picture the Middle Ages, a low horizon of smoke and tilled earth, peasant labourers trudging past a handful of trees. In the distance, an ominous castle keep. In those hard stone towers lived men who ruled not by any written law, but by their own will. Their word was justice, and it was often cruel. Even in lands where the crown's authority reached, the justice it delivered was swift and no less malevolent. Courts were not places of fairness, but stages for fear. Punishment was spectacle, meant to humiliate, warn, and instruct. But of all the punishments one could suffer, the most dreadful was not delivered by an axe or gallows. It came in the form of a hatch in the floor, below the castle. Beneath the hatch was a stone shaft, narrow at the top and wide beneath, where the condemned were simply thrown and left, beyond the reach of hope and prayer. Sometimes those shafts also functioned as drains and sewers. Sometimes the prisoner was confined so tightly that movement was impossible. No trial, no record, no grave, just a life swallowed by the architecture of power. There was a single word to describe this terrible, devouring pit: oubliette, delicate, French, and utterly damning. Let's go down there together, shall we? The oubliette itself. The word oubliette slips from the tongue softly, elegant, almost gentle, but its meaning is far from kind. It comes from the French verb oublier, to forget, and in that one word lies the purpose of the pit. The oubliette was not built to hold you. It was built to banish all thought of you from the world. Physically, an oubliette was a vertical shaft, enterable only through a trapdoor in the ceiling. Once lowered or thrown inside, a prisoner could not climb, pace, or even recline fully. The floor might be uneven, littered with filth, jagged stones, or worse. Some captives were left to die, but others, the unfortunate ones, were given just enough to linger, to live on in total darkness. But that wasn't the worst of it. Oubliettes were sometimes placed not beneath, but within the walls of the upper castle keeps. There, the prisoner could hear footsteps, laughter, life continuing just beyond their reach. It was the cruelest torment. When death at last came, the prisoner was not removed. They were left to decompose in place. The infestations of vermin and the foul air only added to the terror of the next prisoner, who would find they had company within their wet stone cell after all. That was the grim inheritance the oubliette offered. For whom the bell does not toll. Next, we ask, who went into the oubliette? To ask this question is to ask who tyranny wished to vanish. There were no ledgers, no trials, no formalities. The oubliette was not a courtroom judgment. It was a lord's punishment. In the early to high Middle Ages, justice did not favour long imprisonment. If you were insignificant, you were executed or branded. If you were noble, you might be kept in a tower, fed, and eventually ransomed. Dungeons themselves were rare, expensive, unsanitary, and unnecessary. That every castle seems to have one today is a product of romantic myth, not historical reality. Tour guides point to cisterns, ice houses, or grain vaults and call them oubliettes. But in truth, the French word donjon refers not to a dungeon beneath a castle, but to a great tower, a keep. the seat of power, not its basement. And yet, some castles did build dungeons, and some went further, building without any need for embellishment, true and certain oubliettes. St. Andrew's Castle in Scotland is one of them. Forgotten in St. Andrew's. The so-called bottle dungeon of St. Andrew's Castle is carved into the sea-washed cliffs of Fife, Scotland. Cut into sandstone, it is deep, narrow at the neck, and bulbous at the base, like the belly of a bottle, 6 meters down, 4 meters wide. No door, no window, no ladder. Once lowered in, a prisoner could neither stand fully upright nor lie flat. The walls curve inward. The floor is filth and rock. You would find no bedding, no shelves, no latrine, no drain. It was perfectly dark inside, and you could touch only clammy, curving stone. The bottle. The dungeon of St. Andrew's lies beneath the northwest tower, constructed in the 15th and 16th centuries. During Scotland's storm of religious and political upheaval, this was the stronghold of the archbishops of St. Andrews, men who wielded not only ecclesiastical, but princely and military power. The dungeon belonged to the Catholic Church, and the Church knew how to punish heresy. Amongst the prisoners rumoured to have been kept here was George Wishart, the Protestant preacher arrested in 1546. He was burned at the stake shortly after, but tradition claims his final punishing days were spent in the dark bottle beneath the bishop's feet, amongst the bones of others deemed heretics. The archaeology. Modern work by Historic Environment Scotland confirmed the shaft's shape, depth, and cruel inaccessibility. It was sealed for centuries, never meant to be seen. It is not a cell designed for prolonged management of a prisoner. It is a chamber of despair. The bottle dungeon is, in many ways, a perfect oubliette. A prisoner in that space could hear the sea, but not the voices above. There was no lock to pick, no bars to rattle, no escape. The oubliette served its purpose elegantly. Those that were thrown into this one were forgotten completely. We shall never know who they were. And yet, despite its cold perfection, the bottle dungeon at St. Andrews is an outlier. Most castles do not contain such a space. Most lords did not maintain such pits. Its presence at St. Andrews reflects the castle's unique role in Scottish history: a fortress, a bishop's palace, a courtroom, a prison, and a battleground, all in one. But there were other oubliettes. Let's visit one. Leap Castle. Some castles are built of stone, some are built of stories. Leap Castle, high in County Offaly, Ireland, is built of both. We begin in 1532. The O'Carroll clan lived here. They were not shy of blood. Even chroniclers outside the castle noted their feuds, and local tradition sharpens one episode to a point. After Mulrooney O'Carroll's death in 1532, two brothers fought for mastery over the castle. One, a priest, began saying mass in the upper chamber without his younger brother present. It was an insult the other could not bear, and he strode in, took up his sword, and slew his priestly brother on his own altar. From that moment, the room acquired an evil name: the Bloody Chapel. Centuries pass. Ownership shifts to the Derby family. The castle is refitted, remodelled, and finally, tragically, burned in 1922. But just before the fire, a novelist moved in, and she began to record the legends of the castle. Her name was Mildred Derby. Under the pen name Andrew Merry, she published a piece in the Occult Review. Thinly veiling Leap as the House of Horrors. In January 1909, The magazine printed letters describing apparitions in the galleries, lights in the chapel windows, and the figure of a bloody priest, still wondering. But Mildred described something else, which, if it truly does exist, is Ireland's bloodiest oubliette. For behind the chapel, a concealed hatch was found. It led into a dark shaft, and the shaft dropped through the heart of the tower, a narrowed neck opening into bellied blackness. Beneath, so the legend insists, waited iron spikes. Miss them in your fall and you might live, but regret doing so. The oubliette was impartial to your fate. The tales of the O'Carrolls do not stop with fratricide, though. The clan, having hired a band of northern mercenaries, usually named as the MacMahons, won themselves a victory and then invited their swords to supper. The hall was warm, the wine was generous, but a bill was due to these men. Instead of gold, the tale says, the O'Carrolls paid them with poison. Numbers vary, 39 or 40, but the logic is this: cheaper to silence a hireling than to settle his fee. Afterwards, the mercenaries, some still breathing, were said to have been tipped into the hidden shaft off the chapel, the infamous oubliette. Mildred Darby tells us that when the chamber was opened in later centuries, men with lanterns and linen handkerchiefs over their faces found bones in such quantities that they carted them out by the load. 3 cartfuls in total. They found among the bones a pocket watch from the mid-Victorian era, suggesting the oubliette had been used, and recently. If you linger at the lip too long, it's said you'll feel an insurmountable desire to cast yourself in. But look down now, there's nothing to see. And that's the point. When the hatch closes, the castle reclaims its manners. The chapel keeps its secret. The stone forgets. Perhaps in the darkness, that pocket watch ticked for a long time. It's a devastating Gothic image. It is also, as far as official records go, unproven. The horror lives not in the proof, but in the possibility. Let's be honest with one another. You and I both know that this fear didn't die with the Middle Ages. I know what you watch. Nutty Putty, the Thai Cave Rescue, caving disasters, mine collapses. No shame, darlings. I watch them too. But let's ask why. Why are we so obsessed with stories of people trapped underground? Because the oubliette, the cave, the coffin, the crawl space are all masks worn by the same monster, the unwitnessed struggle. Not death itself, but the terror of dying alone, beneath, unnoticed. We watch these stories again and again, not because we're morbid, but because we are human. We're searching for hope, a voice, a sign that someone survived. But the oubliette has no survivors. And that, my darlings, is what makes it such a clean little ending. Well, perhaps not so clean. And on that note, until next time, I remain, as ever, your obedient servant, the Marquis de Sadness.